this is Kasakma Keperu for Project Illuminated, and today I want to talk about the tried and true method of dividing and conquering as used by the oligarchy in an attempt to destroy the civil rights movement. Now I'm going to be talking about a lot of different organizations that the oligarchy works through and a lot of different special interest groups. So I want you to understand I have no allegiance to one over the other. I'm really trying to illuminate their tactics and techniques. But I want to direct your attention back to segregation. And one of the biggest special interest groups or organizations at the time was the Ku Klux Klan. And they were so powerful, in fact, that they overtly marched on Washington, demonstrating their numbers and their power. And they were actively involved in politics, running for various political offices and trying to push forth legislation that would support their ideology. Unfortunately, I think people slowly began to see what the Ku Klux Klan was about. But one of the things that actually spurred their membership was, thanks in part due to D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation, which portrayed the Klan as these valiant knights and blacks as the cause of the downfall of this country. But when people began to see the real violence and the acts of violence committed by the Klan, which were castrations, lynchings, and all forms of terrorism, then public opinion began to sway and turn against the Klan. Now, throughout the years, what you'll find is that the Illuminati, working through these special interest groups and organizations, would change their technique, but at the core, it always remained the same. And this was not, their tactics changed not necessarily through osmosis, but more so through adapting to the current situation to see what works and what doesn't work. As I mentioned before, the Klan was very effective in infiltrating politics, and this is a tactic that has been used by this country for a long, long time, especially in dealing with third world countries, and where we would try to co-opt nations and spread our so-called democracy. And this was done chiefly through individuals from the CIA who were known as Jackals. So, for example, a jackal would enter a third world country. He would speak either with the current president or the next in line and say, listen, if you play ball with us, we'll give you millions and millions of dollars. You'll be a very rich individual. All we ask is that you subjugate the general population, keep them oppressed so they have no political power and they cannot rise up and do anything. So if the head of that country chose to accept the offer and align with the United States, that's great. He would become a puppet. If he did not, then they would either move to a political assassination, or what they would do was they would create political dissent where they would work through social media to turn public opinion against this individual, so that ultimately what would happen would be a coup d'etat. And the person would be removed, and someone appointed by the United States would be put in place again, a puppet leader. And we saw this time and time again with individuals like Noriega, Patrice Lumumba, various different individuals. And ultimately, you'll see at one time that we supported them, like Saddam Hussein, but then when they chose to go their own way, then we would enact a propaganda machine where we would turn their country against them, the general population's country against them, under the guise of our intervention spreading because of the spread of wanting to spread democracy. Now, how is this being used currently today? Same technique, disguising itself in a bit of different ways, working through another or various different organizations. One of the chief organizations that we've seen this being used through is the feminist movement, which was created in Europe. And what they have been very effective in doing is taking feminism, bringing it to African American women, and proposing it as a solution to their ills. So here you have an organization that was created to support white women who were supposed to be at a disadvantage, but now is being circulated and proselytized to African American women, where the African American male is seen as a progenitor of all of their problems. Now, this is irrespective of the truth, because if you look at the African American community, you'll see that there is basically no semblance of a patriarchy. So there's no way in hell that black males have any type of economic or political power to oppress anyone, especially African American women. So clearly, logically, you have to see that feminism does not serve African American women, but it does if you look at the bigger picture in terms of what the Illuminati is trying to accomplish with this. Because what it's doing is it's what I call is splitting the pie. So let's take, for example, you have an organization or you have a race of people, and let's use, again, African Americans. If you take them and you start splitting them up as if they were pieces of pie, you effectively water down their effectiveness. And you do this by creating labels and definitions and terms where the people can align themselves with and pledge their allegiance to. So no longer do you have people identifying themselves as African Americans, but they'll come along and say, well, I'm a Christian, I'm a Muslim, I'm a conservative, I'm a liberal, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, and they're very passionate about these titles. You have to understand, very passionate. And this is where we create factions within factions, again, essentially watering down the power and effectiveness of the group to enact change. So you have feminism, which is now being used to create division with African American males and females. And what you have is the Illuminati sitting back and watching the demise of both groups as they're fighting, all the while watering down the effectiveness of the race or the group as a whole to enact any type of change. And again, that is the divide and conquer technique that is used brilliantly. And going deeper within that, one of the ways that they use, I'm going to give you two examples, to keep this going on autopilot is to shut down any type of communication or discourse that the two groups may have. And the way that you shut this discourse down is you adapt the old adage, if you're not for me, you're against me. And we've seen this work in, especially with 9/11, where if you were not for America and patriotism, then you were a terrorist and you were against us. So this is the same argument that is being used within feminist groups, where it's like, if you don't support feminism, then you are engaged in hate crimes. You have the potential to be a rapist. So again, that effectively shuts down any type of communication and discourse, so that the arguments can keep going and keep flowing. It's the old thing: if you're not for me, you're against me. And you have to understand that you have the right to disagree with somebody's perspective or their ideology. And just because you may not agree with them, that doesn't mean that you're going to go out there and commit mass acts of violence. I may not agree with somebody who likes vanilla ice cream, but that doesn't mean I'm going to beat them over the head. A gentleman from the Midwest may not agree with interracial dating, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to go out there and start beating up an African American man walking down the street alone at night. One does not, equate one with the other, and again, you have the right to disagree. But this whole idea, if you're not for us or against us, again, it's just a means and a method of shutting down communication, shutting down the discourse that can happen to bring the groups together by finding commonalities rather than finding things that they disagree with and that things that can separate them. And once more, using labels, definition, and terms to separate and water down the group. So that's one technique that they use. Another technique they use is through revisionist history, where they'll go in and revise what we all know to be truth. For example, gay and lesbian groups will say, well, there were gay people in ancient Africa, and we know that was not the case. But it furthers their cause by furthering the victim narrative. If they can continue to put forth the platform that they are victims, they gain funding, support from the government. So it's very important that they are seen not just presently, but have been the victims throughout history. And that's a clear technique that is not used just by gay and lesbian groups. But if you look at, for example, the Nation of Islam, I've noticed that in their rhetoric, they talk a lot about how the original man was the Asiatic black man, or how that life began in Mecca, when that is not true. But again, you have to put forth that narrative in order for you to be seen as the victim, and you're possessing this real true knowledge that people need to look to and accept. And most of their arguments are based on emotionalism, very heated emotionalism to further their discussion. So I'm going to end it here, because I think I've put forth a lot of information for you to marinate on and think about. But again, it is just, in summation, it is just about using divide and conquer to create dissent and discord within groups, and create factions within factions to keep them infighting, so that they cannot effectively band together and start a real revolution, or start a real change for the betterment of all. So this is Kasakma Keperu for Project Illuminated, and that's all for now.